Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to Carnivore Podcast, the hottest podcast in the entire podcast universe. And I'm with my great host, Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Eric, I want you to introduce our guest because this is great.
Yeah, we are very happy to have Al Marino from Food Share here. We're going to be talking about what's going on with the food supply, with food banks, and everything that's going on within the crisis. Al, welcome.
Al, welcome.
Good afternoon, Eric.
Carnivore Podcast.
Great to be here.
And Al, as the introduction happened, I had many questions to ask you, but one that really came to mind is that sometimes in life, things become less tangible. The Great Recession is over 10 years ago. Talk to our listeners about how all of a sudden things changed overnight. I would assume they changed overnight for you, correct?
To an extent, Jeff, that's true. I mean, it's become certainly more in the mainstream here, more center focused. But I will say this, that food insecurity in general has been around for quite some time. Food banking nationally has been around since the early 80s, where people have really been aware of it and trying to make it better for people.
Explain what it is, though, for listeners. Explain what that is, because I think that's good before we even go on.
Absolutely.
Food banking. Tell us what that is.
So basically, in the early 80s, people decided that people needed help. And so food banks basically began around the country, and it evolved to today being a national network of food banks. Main name out there right now is Feeding America, which is based in Chicago, and it's a network of food banks. There's about 200 of us throughout the United States, and if someone's hungry, they could go anywhere in the U.S., north, south, east, west, and they could be directed to getting food locally. So basically, it started in the early 80s. People kind of thought, I think, when that started, that it was just going to be kind of a temporary fix, but it has really lasted.
Actually, I graduated college in 1982, and that was a big recession, and a lot of people were hurting then, so they thought it was temporary. Correct, Al?
Absolutely, and that was actually the year that Food Share really got started, and several of the food banks in the U.S. as well.
Okay, so I asked you a question, and Dr. Lopkin can certainly attest to this, that I'm not always right. I guess I was kind of fascinated, and it was my own inclination that, the economy was buzzing along. I thought for someone in your situation that even 6 months ago, things were quiet.
Absolutely.
No, that's not the case?
No, it's not the case at all, Jeff. And what basically what kind of happened, all of a sudden this thing came out of nowhere. And we all knew in the food banking business that we were going to be really relied upon in a big, big way. And that's what's happening right now as we speak.
Okay, so now let me ask you, and then I'm going to throw out to Dr. Eric Lopkin. Do you see a difference? Because I worked at a food bank during the Great Recession, and what kind of blew me away and sometimes brought me to tears, quite frankly, is I saw people like myself, and maybe it was self-serving that I did cry, but you had accountants with 2 degrees, the whole thing, going to a food bank And I'm just wondering, do you see a difference? I know it's a short-term kind of thing, but since Corona, do you see your traditional clientele and now it's different in terms of its professionals, or am I wrong?
No, you're very right, Jeff. We have seen.
Thank you. It doesn't happen all. Go ahead.
We have seen the numbers dramatically change since the beginning of March. I think it might be helpful for me to just kind of share with the audience a little bit, how we do our work here in Connecticut. We are the food bank for Hartford and Tolland counties. I talked about food insecurity, about 118,000 people food insecure regularly with about 33,000 children. But when Corona got here, all of a sudden all those numbers have been blown up. We normally distribute our food through about 200 some odd food pantries, homeless shelters, soup kitchens throughout the area. We have our mobile food share trucks that go out to some 60-odd sites twice a month, delivering fresh, nutritious food. And all of a sudden, it's not enough. It's not enough. To give you an idea, I have a number kind of in front of me. Just from normal time, say from February to March, we distributed through our food pantries about 600,000 pounds of food. From March,
can I ask you something
mid-March
else?
to mid-April, pardon me?
I'm sorry. One thing I think our listeners and Dr. Lopkin would certainly think is very interesting is, can you share with our listeners the difference between, I don't know if you get involved in it, and I don't know at all, but the difference between someone that has, let's say, been on this for a while, has benefited from your service, and then someone that's new to it. I mean, isn't that a huge adjustment?
It's an amazing thing. So you have people that all of a sudden 4 weeks ago had careers, they had jobs,
right?
And they're now coming out because they need food for their families. They need some help, and honestly, they don't want to be there. They're embarrassed to be there in many situations, but they know they have to do something to help their family. And so we're in the business of helping feed people, and that's what we need to do. And that's why we made this move this past week over to Rensselaer Field, because we felt as though what we were doing through the pantries and through the mobile wasn't enough.
Well, Al, before I throw it out to Dr. Lopkin, that's what struck me, and I don't want to harp on something, but that's what struck me when I worked at a food pantry for a very short period of time, is these professional people. It blew me away. I will never forget that for the rest of my life. People that never thought they'd be there, but are there. And does that hit home to you before I throw it out to Dr. Lopkin?
Absolutely, Jeff. We're seeing it every day, and it's tough. And you talked about bringing yourself to tears a couple of times. I cried
I cried several times.
Every day. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about. It's extremely emotional work, and you just hope and pray that things get better. But we have to stay firm. We have to stay strong and be there for the people that are relying upon us.
Fantastic. Dr. Lopkin, before you before you ask your great questions, which I'm sure you're going to have, maybe you can throw out the number for our listeners.
Yes, if you'd like to call in and ask Al a question or add your opinion to the show, you can join us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. And Al, you were saying before that in a typical month prior to this, you were giving out 400,000 pounds of food. What's the numbers now? What does it look like?
So it was actually that Eric, that number was actually 600,000 pounds back in February, and now from mid-March till mid-April, that number has jumped to about 1.1 million pounds. So we have almost doubled the amount. Now, this is just food going to our partner programs. We have the different agencies, the soup kitchens, et cetera, that type of thing. And bear in mind, we've had some agencies that have closed only because they didn't have enough volunteers. There were meal programs, or there were pantries maybe in the community colleges. So the numbers don't lie.
Now, you've also got a couple of additional challenges. It's not just that, there's so much more of a need. You're also facing a lack of food donations that, as I understand it, used to come from supermarkets. And you have to do all of this while keeping your volunteers and staff safe, doing social distancing. Tell us a little bit about the challenges that you're dealing with.
So basically, the vast majority of the food that we get, as you mentioned, has come from our big retail partners. People like Stop and Shop, and Big Y, ShopRite, and people like that. And a lot of that food comes in on a regular basis. But as you say, the food supply has dried up. So, and all of a sudden now we are being forced with having to go out and buy food. And normally we do buy some food throughout the year. A lot of it is fresh produce because that's what goes out in our mobile food share programs. But all of a sudden now we're buying a lot more. We have had to purchase about $400,000 worth of food year to date. Normally it's like in a whole year it might be like $250,000 worth of food. So, I mean, we're spending in just a short period of time a dramatic increase. So the overall expenses at Food Share and at many food banks have risen dramatically. We figure that our cost of operation has gone up through coronavirus by about $50,000 a week. A lot of that is attributed to volunteers dropping off now because a lot of our volunteers, we have over 6,000 volunteers, and a lot of them are corporate groups that are mandated not to come in anymore. A lot of them are senior citizens that, because you're in risk categories, they're not coming in. Students are not coming in. So we have staff that are being paid overtime to do whatever they could. We've had to hire 13 temporary workers to do that as well. So the costs have gone up dramatically. And all of a sudden, everything that we're doing at Rentschler Field as well.
All right. I'd like to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Rentschler Field, but before we do that, we need to take a break and go to commercial. So we'll be right back.
Hi, Chuck. Elmo wants to know, what is the census?
The census is a special time when we count every single person in the country.
Do kids and babies count, too?
Of course. Counting everyone in your home helps support your neighborhood by funding schools, hospitals, and more. So complete the census by calling, going online, or returning your form by mail. It's totally private.
Visit 2020census.gov and
make your family count.
Brought to you by Carnegie Corporation of New York and the Ad Council.
And we're back, and if you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693. So, Al, we've mentioned a couple of times about Rentschler Field. Can you give a description of what's going on? And for our listeners that aren't familiar with this, Rentschler Field is the football field that the Yukon Huskies college football team plays on. It's a huge space, and it's been packed with cars lately needing food.
Well, wait a second. Before you answer that, Al, I think Dr. Lopkin, that's an amazing point, because that would really point to the severity of the situation. Al, before this coronavirus happened, how many people were showing up to Rensselaer Field?
Well, quite honestly, Jeff, we did not go to Rensselaer until this started kicking in. We just did it this past week.
Really?
We actually have a second facility. Our main facility and warehouse is in Bloomfield. We have a second facility at the south end of Hartford, the Hartford Regional Market, where we have a couple of stalls. We do a lot of sorting of produce there, and about when the thing started kicking in, we opened that up and we invited people to come there to get food on a daily basis. Quite frankly, the lines were huge. They were wrapping out onto Reserve Road, and so we made a decision. Our president and CEO, Jason Jakubowski, reached out to Governor Lamont to get the permission to go to Rensselaer Field, and we said, let's do it. So we started this past Monday. We do it in the morning from 8:30 in the morning till about 12 noon, and we've gone every day. The numbers have been staggering. We have averaged about 1,000 cars a day. Now, when I say a day, once again, remind the audience, 8:30 a.m. to 12 noon, so it's really a half a day.
God,
so we're averaging about 1,000 cars a day.
Al, that is Eric, isn't that mind-boggling to you?
It is
incredible. It's incredible.
They
start lining up. They start lining up. The cars are lining up about an hour to an hour and a half earlier than when we start. So there's about 6 lines of cars. It was on TV the other day as well, and it's on our website now as well, foodshare.org. And people could see what's going on. It's just the numbers don't lie. Let me just point this out. I think this is really effective. I think up until now, maybe the first 3 weeks or so, you saw on the national news, the network news, talking about food banks in San Diego and Pittsburgh and New Orleans and Dallas, and they saw cars lined up. But all of a sudden it started happening here. And it really, really hit home to a lot of people. So we've averaged about 1,000 cars a day. Today we had 1,208 cars. And bear in mind, it's a rainy day in Hartford, Connecticut today.
And
we gave out
mind-boggling.
Pardon me?
That is mind-boggling. Eric, isn't that mind-boggling? 1,200 cars?
It is.
I mean, we went from an economy, and I understand there's always people that fall through the cracks. We went through an economy 2 months ago that, Al, isn't that shocking? We're in a depression.
It blows people away, Jeff.
Are we
people
in a depression in your mind?
They don't have any food, and they're not getting their unemployment checks right now. They haven't started yet. And people need food. It's just really amazing. They're worried about paying rent. They're worried about paying their medical bills. It is mind-boggling. It truly is.
It's to me, it just resonates with me, and it's disturbing. And I think as this goes on, Al, you're the expert. I think this is going to get much worse. You're going to see people. Here's what I really think, Al. I think you're going to see people that never even contemplated going to a food bank at a food bank. Am I correct?
Absolutely. We anticipated being dug in here for a while. We talking to our own staff as well as talking to the experts of Feeding America, we feel as though that we could be dug in here for about another 6 months at a minimum to really be able to help the people, because it's going to take a while for things to come back. So all those cars every day, and throughout the whole week, we gave away this week just at Rensselaer Field about 100,000 pounds of food.
Oh God, Dr. Locken, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Al, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Al, but I believe I heard you guys were planning on being at Rensselaer Field next week, but you weren't sure you were going to have enough food to meet the need?
Well, we actually now have tied it down, Eric, for the next 2 weeks. We'll be there all of next week and all of the following week up until May 8th. We are very, very confident now. We have secured some things. We've had some donations come in. We are buying on the outside, as I said. So we're buying food. We are still getting donations as well. And there will be enough. We make sure that when we go there, our logistics manager, Don Piccini, he knows that he comes with enough food. We're not going to run out any day. So there will be enough. So we encourage people to come. But Al,
let me ask you something. I trust your judgment. I think you're a sincere guy, and I think our listeners can sense that, and so do I. But you don't know how this thing is going to unfold. I mean, this thing could, because we're only really seriously 6 weeks into this. This could go on till July. I mean, obviously, duh. It could go on beyond July. I mean, this is not the end game. This is the beginning, isn't it, Al?
Yeah, it really is, and it's gonna be challenging for a while. You know, I will tell you this: we are committed to staying open as well. I mean, there are some food banks in the U.S. that are having some real big difficulties. Luckily, Food Share has been well managed, well run for many years, going back to our first CEO, Gloria McAdam, and we've done some good things. So we're committed. We're going to be there for the people, and we're not going to let people down.
Now, Al, this is a micro question before I throw it out to Dr. Lotkin. And I think it'd be interesting for our listeners. What is I don't even know how to describe it, but how do you articulate the mindset of someone that never thought they would be where they are? Do you deal with that day in and day out? If you don't, you don't. If you do, you do. But I know, I mean, again, when I did my little thing, I was shocked at how gracious people were that were professionals, college educated, that were getting food from where I was working. Could you talk to that? What are people's mindsets that in their wildest dreams never thought they would be where they are?
It's a great point, Jeff. I mean, you know, you have people here that all of a sudden they thought nothing was going to go wrong. Like you said earlier, the economy was rolling along.
And they did all the right things. They went to college. They went to trade school. Whatever they did. And you end up where you – I mean, talk to our listeners about that. I find that jaw-dropping. Yeah, and they're out there and, you know, all of a sudden they thought things were good, you know. Economy going well, stock market doing good, bills are being paid, and all of a sudden, bingo, 23, 26 million people out of work in the USA. So, and it's going to take a while. There was a article in the paper the other day that talked about, you know, it could take up to 2 years to get these jobs back. So yeah, the mindset is tough. And like I said earlier, they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed to be going, but they have no choices. And you know, how about the people, you know, so they've got to pay their rent. They've got to pay their utility bills. They've got to pay for medical situations. Food gets cut. So that's why they come to us. And we've got to be able to do that. It's a very tough thing. Al, how about the mental state of these people? You know, I hear and I watch the news a lot, and they talk about things of depression and suicide and those types of things. I mean, if you're all, I know life is not fair, and there's people that always rely on these kinds of services, and God bless them. But if you're someone that you never thought you'd be, what is the mindset?
They're devastated. They're devastated. It's probably the best way I can use to describe it. The best word I can use to describe. I mean, they're in a situation, but they have hope, which we should all have hope. You know, I feel like we will come out of this, but it's going to take some time. But these folks are tough situations. You know, many times, you know, we had one man that came through this past week, and he was in tears when he was interviewed. You know, as he was getting the food put in the back of his car, he was thanking our people, our volunteers, saying that, you know, he had lost his job, you know, back a couple of months ago, and his wife has been out of work for several years because she was in a car accident. They have no income coming in. They had no choice but to come here, and they were so appreciative for what they are receiving. But honestly, sometimes it's just, you know, it's a lifeline for a short period of time. So it's going to be a difficult situation. The good news is, though, in addition to what we're doing in Rensselaer Field, They've got all these food pantries that they could go to. They've got our mobile food share sites that we're giving out food, all kinds of nutritious food, and it's really, really helping. But, yeah, they're going to be tough, and you're right. There is a lot of mental depression that's out there. So, we've got to be able to be there for these folks. When I say the word we, I mean all of us, all the listeners and everyone. Check on your neighbors, check on your family and friends, make a phone call. We might be social distancing, but you can still talk to people. You just got to let them know that better days are going to come.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopkin. You have the final question. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've only got a few minutes left. So, Al, for somebody that actually needs this service, can you describe the process, how they go about going to a food bank and what happens?
Absolutely. So I would recommend anyone that is in need, first of all, go to our website. Our website is www.foodshare.org. It's a very comprehensive site. They could find out where they could get help, either through their local pantries in the town they live in. There's also instructions on how they could text and be told where to go for mobile food share. They could also use that same site to volunteer because we need volunteers, and they could also donate through that site, www.foodshare.org, and there's all ways that they could find help.
All right, and so they don't need to sign up ahead of time. They can just find out where to go and go.
The way it works, Eric, is if they're going to a local pantry, they could find out in their town, and by their town, they could find out where all the local pantries are. They do need to sign up ahead of time. However, with the mobile food share sites, there are no questions asked. They could go to the sites as well as go and rent a field, and they will get food. The pantries, there is a little bit more of a process, and they could go that way as well. They could also continue to sign up for SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It's the old food stamp program, and they could get ways to be approved as well. And our volunteers will help with that.
Well, I applaud you because you're doing God's work. Eric, you would agree with that, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that is so necessary and for so many people. So, we're all grateful for the work you're doing, Al. And, to our listeners, if you can make a donation, please do.
Please.
And if you need the help, please don't be embarrassed. Look up where to go and get the help you need.
Well, thanks so much, Al. That was so. Thank you so much for being on the show.
And I thank you guys for having me. It's great to be able to tell this story. I could go on for hours, believe me when I tell you that. But it's a very passionate group that we have at Food Share. I'm proud each and every day to be there, and I'm very, very thankful for being able to help others. Things will get better, but we just have to stay consistent, stay strong, and stay healthy and safe.
Dr. Lopkin, any final thoughts?
We're actually just hitting our end. So I just want to remind our listeners they can catch us every Friday at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. You can hear the replay as well as Carnivore Bites, which is our weekly news analysis, at the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts. Thanks to Al Marino for being with us.
Thank you, guys.